Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston sports podcast, part of the National Bleav Network. And joining me to look at the Rockets free agent pickup, Clint Capela, is Hawks insider David Lee. I say Rockets free agent pickup, but Rockets fans know Clint Capela really well. David is the host of the Atlanta Hawks Film Room podcast. It's great to have you on the show, David. And I feel like we covered two of the teams with the best NBA off seasons. It's been great for both the Rockets and the Hawks.
Yeah, definitely agreed. And I appreciate you having me on. I'm happy to share any insights I have about Clint Capela. He is someone that got a bit ostracized by the fan base, but, hopefully I can give you all a rational take on him.
Yeah, I'm just curious because Rockets fans feel like they know who Clint Capela is, but I'm wondering how different he is from his Rockets days and early Hawks years. He averaged 8.9 points, 8.5 rebounds, and 1.1 assists, his lowest in those categories since his third year in Houston. True shooting is his worst since his second season last year. Can you explain how much he slipped, David? What's different about Capela?
Yeah, I think the first thing is just he never had great touch around the rim. And so as his athleticism has declined, it just got tougher for him to finish with finesse as opposed to force. And so he's had a variety of injuries. When we ended up I can't remember if it was a trade or a signing. I think it was a signing when we initially got him to Atlanta. He didn't play that first year. And then he came back and he was awesome. Legitimately defensive player of the year caliber, carried that defense, which made that Hawks team. Really, he was the entire crux of the defense. Like if he was not playing at that level, there's no way we get to the Eastern Conference Finals. But you look at his rim finishing numbers, I think that really tells the tale. His last season, 2024, was his worst in his career, really, relative to volume. He shot 60% at the rim. That was the worst among any player 6'10" or taller, except for Jaren Jackson Jr. That league average rim percentage is around 61, 62%. So to be below average as a center, it's not great. And the thing what really frustrated Hawks fans was that he would miss a lot of easy shots because Trae would generate high quality looks at the rim that he would sometimes smoke. It became overblown as a problem because, yes, he would smoke one or two makeable layups every game, but he was also rebounding really well. He was still pretty solid defensively, even in this last year. The Hawks just asked him to guard more away from the basket, and I don't think that's necessarily his strength at this point. But I do think in a more reduced role, which he presumably would be in Houston, where you already have those two bigs in front of him, he's like a really good third big. Like we have been asking for Capela to come off the bench, not because he's awful, but because it just makes more sense to lean into Nikeil Alexander-Walker at this point. But he's perfectly fine for 20 minutes a night. I don't see any problem with that at all.
Yeah, it's something where the fans feel like, oh yeah, he's a vertical threat. He can complement Steven Adams in that way. But I've been trying to tell people, after that move was made, he's not that much of a vertical threat anymore. I mean, they had this guy N'Faly Dante on a two-way last year, and it looks like he might be back on a two-way this year. He's more of a vertical threat than Capela right now. I mean, is that everything you're seeing? Like, what can Capela give you now at this point? Is it just rebounds?
I think he's a really good offensive rebounder. So he rebounded 14% of our misses, which is in the 9th percentile. Like to your point about the finishing, he took a lot of finishing attempts, but he shot 7 percentage points worse than league average there. And so that's not great. And some of it is because he's not getting as high as he used to. But I think like his overall efficiency is it would be fine for a guard, but he's a big. And that's what really causes problems. What he's great at is screening. He's great at finishing above the rim when he can get there, and it's an uncontested finish. And he's good at offensive rebounds. And so I think the screening ability will be – I feel like you guys already have two screeners, but having 48 minutes of great screening, that should be really helpful. It also helps you reduce the amount of load that Steve-O is carrying because he is so crucial to Houston's success, in my opinion, with the way especially where they were set up last season. Like he was so big on the offensive glass, and he gave them that offensive punch that they weren't getting from anywhere else. And I think that having Clint to at least reduce his load a little bit, maybe give you 60 to 70% of what Steve-O gives you, I think that makes sense to me. But I do think if you're expecting him to come in as like someone who's going to be dunking on top of people, I don't think I wouldn't want to see him and Steve-O play together. I think that'd be pretty nasty. But I think that he can definitely come in. He could be if you want to play Şengün, you could probably play Şengün and Clint together. You could do, I don't know. I think I would want to limit him to 15 to 20 minutes a night at max. And then I want it when the minutes become higher leverage and we're in the playoffs, I would much rather have Steve out there. It would be my approach to it.
No, absolutely. Where's his defense right now? Where's Capela's defense?
He's always been a good drop coverage defender, so he has great positioning, uses his hands well. Because he does have that lack of verticality, he can sometimes give up vertical space. Where I think he really struggles is when you put him on the perimeter. The great thing about Houston is you guys have so many guys who are good at getting over screens, right? So whether it's Van Vliet or Amen Thompson, Tari Eason, guys who are going to really compete and allow him to sit in that drop. In Atlanta, it was inconsistent at times. If Dyson was on the ball, you could put Clinton drop no problem. But if it was Trae Young on the ball, if it was Garrison Matthews, another Rockets legend, sometimes Capela would have to come up to the level of the screen, and he'd have to maybe ice it to the baseline, try and blitz it, try to hedge, and his recovery speed isn't great. So if you put him on the ball and he has to recover back to the big man, I would see teams just hit the big and get an easy 2 points at times. So his defense is, as long as he's around the rim, he's still a deterrent. Opponents shot 10 percentage points worse at the rim when he was there. Thing was, he only contested 8 shots at the rim per game, and that's very low volume for a center. But I think that's less about his ability to do it and more so about the scheme we were running, where we were asking him to be on the perimeter more. So as long as he's there, I think he can make an impact. And again, I think with less of a role in terms of he's not carrying as many minutes, I think you'll see him be a positive at the rim just off the virtue of his bulk. Yeah, that's kind of what I think about his defense at this point.
Yeah, Rockets fans remember him as being very healthy, but he's had some injury problems in Atlanta, right?
That was another thing that kind of led Hawks fans to sour on him. He ended up not playing after the deadline for the most part. I don't know the specifics of that situation. It could have been the Hawks asked him to sit out. It could have been Capela asked to sit out. Whatever it may have been, he was not healthy leading into the deadline. He had a hand issue. If he has a hand issue, he already has finishing issues. I mean, it was bad. He was sort of trailing in the wrong direction or trending in the wrong direction as a finisher. Didn't look like his health was there. So I think they sort of just either came to a mutual decision or Capela said, hey, I don't feel good enough to go. I want to go ahead and get ready for the free agency. And they came to some sort of decision. But Hawks fans looked at it as he quit on the team. I think it's tougher when you get older too. He knows that with a very athleticism dependent game, he only has so much time to get contracts. And if the Hawks are going to bring him back, it would be on a much cheaper deal than what he got from Houston. Because he got 3 years, $21 million, right? It was the contract.
Yeah.
So that would probably be out of the Hawks price range just because of what they would use him for versus what Houston would. But I think it's a reasonable contract for that, again, for a third big.
What was the Hawks fans' reaction and your reaction to, Capela going, but now you're trading for Porzingis, who's the embodiment of injury issues?
Yeah, it's a good question because I think a lot of Hawks fans were finally we're giving the keys to Onyeka, right? I think that Kristaps trade was before then. The Kristaps trade put a little bit more in a doubt about how entrenched is Onyeka as a starter. From my perspective, I would still start Onyeka because see what you just said about Porzingis is injury issues. I don't want him playing 28 to 32 minutes a night. I personally would only want him playing 20 to 25 minutes in the regular season, and then maybe you ramp him up as you need. But the Hawks do have a pretty nice ceiling compared to recent seasons, especially with the state of the East. But they do have guys who have some somewhat concerning health issues. Jalen Johnson has missed the last couple of seasons with some random stuff. Onyeka has had some lower body injuries, which is always scary for a big. And then, of course, Kristaps is, to your point, the embodiment of not being healthy. So the one thing Capela was before this season was that he was durable. He played above 60 games every season before this season. He played 73, 65, 74. So he was available. We knew that at any point, though, the Hawks having a rotation of Onyeka and Clint Capela was a really strong 48-minute big man rotation. It's better than most teams 1 and 2 punch off the bench in terms of their bigs. And so Kristaps introduces a dynamic we've never had for the Hawks. We've never had a stretch 5 rim protector. The closest thing we had was Dwayne Dedmon. And so he introduces a lot of really fun offensive versatility stuff. But it is definitely something that's in the back of my mind because we can't afford that injury to him. Just looking at the state of the roster right now with bigs. And given that both of our bigs have had issues in the past, I wouldn't be surprised if they sign a veteran big to finish out the offseason.
Yeah, you guys have a couple of roster spots still available?
Yeah, we have 2 at this point. They just converted Jurisic to a standard contract.
I've become just a huge Nikeil Alexander-Walker fan. I was hoping the Rockets might take a look at him if they had the money. How do you feel about adding him, David? And were you a fan too?
Oh yeah, I was definitely a fan. He was on my list in free agency. He fits our ethos a lot. Quick decision maker, great off the catch shooter, can drive the ball, drive closeouts. And he's a really good passer too for his role. The defense is what excites me because we didn't really have anyone else in Dyson's vein defensively. Like Kobe Buffkin was supposed to be that. He ended up getting a shoulder issue. Now that you have Dyson and Nikeil, you can pretty much have someone hound the perimeter defender for all 48 minutes. And Dyson was carrying a really heavy minutes load, a really heavy defensive load, and he was still producing offensively. So I can't wait to see what he looks like, with not having to constantly chase everyone around. You can deploy him off the ball a little bit more. You could do some really cool things with them, and you could switch both of them, of course. And then Nikeil, I think, will be a part of a committee off the bench in terms of running the offense. So you may not necessarily have a traditional backup point guard, but you have a lot of guys who can handle the ball off the bench in the non-Trae minutes, and he's going to be a big part of that. So I was definitely a fan.
I want to get your thoughts on if the Hawks are an Eastern Conference Finals contender. If there's somebody that can compete for the finals period, we'll hit that in a second. But I want our listeners to get in on this. What do you expect from Capela? Does any of this change your thinking on the pickup? Let me know in the YouTube comments. And in case you missed it, check out my Saturday breakdown of Reed Shepherd's incredible start to the Summer League. Not so great on Sunday, but we definitely got into what he did on Friday. Later this week, I'm going to have a Rockets guest that you guys are going to want to make sure that you're subscribed for on YouTube and your favorite podcast app. So get all the updates by subscribing and drop us a quick thumbs up too. All right, David, are the Hawks now an Eastern Conference contender? Can they go to the finals? Where do you put them in the hierarchy?
Yeah, when I look at the East, I kind of see New York, Cleveland, Orlando tentatively too, but there's a handful of teams that I think are still better than us. I think we're kind of in that second tier with Detroit, Philly, just because I'm not a believer in their health. Maybe Milwaukee too, but I also don't like. There's a lot of questions I have about most teams. Like our only question that I have, I have a full belief in the on-court product. It's just about health and availability. Like if we get 60 games from Kristaps Porzingis, we should be a top 4, top 5 seed, and that should be the expectation. When it comes to the playoffs, I think we do give a lot of teams problems. I'm always a little bit cautious when like teams get overly hyped up by everyone else that isn't a Hawks fan, because I think they're starting to build up expectations for us that I think may be a little bit audacious. And it's not that I think this team isn't good enough. It's just more so like there's always these expectations for teams. And then there's like everyone thinks that the East is going to be bad. There's going to be some teams that are better than you think, right? Like I think Boston is not going to be a pushover, even though they did kind of break up their team. Like they still have a pretty strong core. I would say we're definitely, I think we're a good pick to make the second round. I think for sure. Like I feel confident about us winning the first round series, but it'll be really matchup dependent after that. I think we match up decently well against Cleveland because they don't have like a big wing creator. That's the one hole we have on our roster. Like we don't have someone to handle a big wing. But against Orlando, it might be a little bit tougher because as good as Dyson is, he's a bit too small for both Paolo and Franz. And we don't have a big wing defender on the roster. And it's kind of the same thing for New York because we don't have enough size on the interior. If Jalen's down or if Jalen's guarding someone on the perimeter, like I would assume that we would put him on Cat. So there's certain matches where I wouldn't like our chances to make the Eastern Conference Finals, but if we get the right path, then I think by all means this team is good enough to do it.
What do you think Jalen Johnson's ceiling is?
Yeah, Jalen's really interesting. He's another guy that I feel like people will see some clips of him and be like, oh, this is a future star. And I think that the big thing for Jalen is he has to figure out how to create for himself. He's awesome in transition, but his half-court numbers aren't nearly as good. And some of that is that even at 6'10", he hasn't yet learned how to embrace and create contact. He'll often fade away from defenders. He'll back guys down, go over his right shoulder. He'll go to a floater in the lane. And sometimes I need to remember, you're 6'10". You're 6'10", 220 pounds. Go and create an event at the rim. And it's not that every shot needs that, and he does need that in-between game. But he would be a lot more effective and efficient if he took more of those shots at the rim and forced the issue physically. And then that's where I think like a post-up game is going to be really important for him. He will also benefit a lot from Porzingis being in the lineup. Also, Onyeka Okongwu starting to stretch the floor too. The one thing I forgot to mention with Clint, he was so detrimental to the Hawks offense as a whole, even with the offensive rebounding, even with his slight inefficiency, because he just clogged the paint. And the Hawks don't have strong enough drivers to compensate for that, right? Like Trae Young already has size issues. Dyson is a guy who often opted for floaters. Jalen, I just mentioned some of the physicality stuff. Reza Shea, again, some physicality stuff. So because those are the four guys who were driving the ball the most, and Capela's man was always in the lane, their rim finishing numbers weren't great. You look at Trae Young's numbers at the rim with Clint Capela off, he shot 9 percentage points better. Jalen Johnson was somewhere around 5 to 6 points better. And it went down the line. So again, not as big of an issue in my opinion for Houston because, KD is a great mid-range shooter. You've got guys who can rip through and finish through contact like Amen Thompson. So I don't think it'll be as big of an issue, but it is something to notice that as much value as Capela added on the offensive glass, he probably took away from letting his man clog the paint. And that's a big thing that you're going to see from Jalen Johnson this year, where I hope he'll be a lot more aggressive, because when KP was able to space the Celtics as a whole space teams better than any team in the NBA. They pulled rim protectors away a higher average distance. When you have your center at the top of the key, your other guys need to be able to take advantage of that, rip through and drive and get to the basket. So I expect a lot from Jalen this season because he's in the best offensive situation of his career. It's about how much work has he done to be, embrace physicality, back guys down, develop a post game, rip through. So he should have a big season.
Are you a Trae Young guy, or is it like the old Facebook relationship? It's complicated.
No, I'm definitely a Trae Young guy. So I'm born in Atlanta and I've been a Hawks fan my whole life. So since I'm 23. So since I've been born, Trae's the best player we've had. Arguably on track to become the best player in franchise history, if not rival Dominique Wilkins. And so I do have an emotional attachment to the team and to Trae Young as an extension. But I'm one of his guys because I feel like that they haven't necessarily done the best job putting a team around him. Now, I definitely will recognize the difficulties of building around a smaller guard and some of his physical limitations. But they did not they didn't make the shrewd enough moves to sort of compensate for that and then also complement what he does well. And I think that they've done a much better job this offseason. And people are starting to say, like, oh, if it doesn't work, it's Trae's fault. I think that's kind of ridiculous because basketball is not an individual sport. He is in the best situation of his career, but there are a ton of different things that could happen for this not to work. Like basketball and contending in general takes a lot of luck, right? Could go in against the Hawks' favor, could go in the Hawks' favor. I think he will perform really well considering the context he's in. I think that he's been trending more towards playing off the ball. I think he has a bunch of ball handlers to play off of. He's got an actual offensive half-court option besides just a pick and roll for the first time in his career, really. Like John Collins was the last guy we could say, hey, go create offense for yourself and also somewhat draw the defense towards you. DeJounte Murray was able to create for himself, but he wasn't really doing it in a way that involved everyone else. And so I think Kristaps post-ups, which were the best action in the NBA on that play type, is going to be huge because it's going to reduce the load for Trae, allow him to be a passer, get off the ball, shoot it where he shot it much better off the ball. So definitely a Trae Young guy, and I think he'll have a big season too.
What group of players does he sort of fit in with? Is it fair to group him with Ja Morant? Like, who are his equals among the top 30 or 40 guys in the NBA?
There was a time where I feel like Trae was like a top 5 point guard, consensus-wise. Like, I still feel like he's one of the best offensive engines in the game. And I think that because of that, I view him as a top 5, top 10-ish point guard. When you don't have playoff success, naturally, you're going to fall down that order, right? So I think Jalen Brunson, Tyrese Halliburton are guys that have sort of superseded him. I think to your point, someone like Ja Morant is probably who he's viewed with in terms of his peers. I still have Trae in that same Halliburton Brunson tier because I think that their front offices have just put them in a great situation. And they're also great players in their own right, but they're also different types of players. Like Halliburton is a quick decision maker who gets off the ball, and he's a shooter first in terms of his scoring ability. And he's not a manipulator in the same way that Trae is. Trae is a much more of a manipulator in terms of the way he operates offense. Brunson's more of a score first point guard. They're all different types of guys, but I think they're equally capable in terms of like their ability to push a team to success. And it just depends on what they have in terms of their supporting cast. I think that both New York and Indiana have done a phenomenal job building a team around their guys. This is Atlanta's chance to enter that combo and sort of rebuild the value and equity that Trae had coming off that Eastern Conference Finals run. And honestly, like the playoffs is the only chance you really have to rebuild your perception, right? And so I'm sure for him as well, like he's looking at this as an opportunity to get back into the good graces of the league because to some extent, he hasn't necessarily been viewed favorably since the Eastern Conference Finals run. So for me personally, he's still in that tier. I would understand why people would have him in maybe like the secondary or tertiary tier of like 20 to 30 or 20 to 35.
Last thing I want to hit with you is the coach, and I'm a Mizzou alum, so I go way back with Quin Snyder. It did not end well at Missouri, but he's restructured his coaching career. What's your impression of Quin Snyder at this point?
I mean, I love Quin because I like to ask him analytical questions at the post games, and sometimes he'll say, hey, that's interesting. Or he's like, oh, we don't care about the numbers, essentially. So it's like, it's a good dynamic that we have. And I feel like he's a very cerebral coach, which I really appreciate, because the Hawks were lacking some creativity in the coaching room with Nate McMillan, offensively 100%, right? And so they've embraced a quicker pace. For a team that had a lot of open court athletes in 2024, they were one of the lowest transition frequency teams in the NBA, which made no sense when you have Trae Young's ability to make outlet passes and you have Jalen Johnson's ability to finish in transition. And so we've seen this huge philosophy shift for the Hawks in just the second year of Quin Snyder's full tenure. And I think that as he's getting more pieces that fit his vision, you're going to see his philosophies and coaching tenets really impact the way the Hawks play. So I'm a big fan of Quin Snyder. He's super fashionable. He's a fun interview. I think he's an inventive and quick thinking coach. There are some things where, and Jazz fans warned us about this, he can be a bit stubborn with his rotations. He can lean on guys that aren't, he'll be a little bit archaic with the way that he brings guys in and out of the game. Sometimes he leans on guys that aren't really as impactful, but he at least has a reason and a rationale behind what he's doing. And he articulates that in the post game. So I'm a big Quin Snyder fan.
As an outsider perspective, I should ask you, just where do you put the Rockets in the Western Conference hierarchy? You know, you got Denver, OKC, some of the names. Where do you put the Rockets?
Yeah, for me, I mean, they're up there with Denver and OKC as, tier 1 contenders. Obviously defer to OKC just because they have the championship equity and they retain their entire team. But I think that Houston addressed their biggest need, which was half-court shot creation, and they didn't compromise their defense to do it. Jalen Green's a really intriguing young guy, but I felt like he was somewhat sandbagging them with the variability of his shot creation and shot-making ability. At this point, the Rockets had ascended in terms of their contention desires that they couldn't really wait on him to develop. And I think that when you address someone at a point of need and you remove one of your few somewhat neutral defenders and you add in a positive, even at 36 years old, and Kevin Durant, and he's a much superior shot creator. Now you've got massive size. You got Dorian Finney-Smith there as well. You still have your offensive rebounding advantage, incredibly deep. It's going to be really fun to see them in the playoffs. And I would definitely say you guys are probably my pick to make the second seed. I really like what Denver did too, but I just think you guys are deeper and that will go longer in the regular season. And then we're also seeing in the playoffs that guys are turning into their bench or digging into their bench a little bit more and playing really hard pressure defense, which I think suits the Rockets style perfectly. And even if the offense isn't clicking, I mean, you always have the offensive rebounding advantage. So no, I'm excited to see you guys. I'm definitely going to be watching a lot of games. I'm a big KD guy.
All right, you just made a lot of fans in Houston, that's for sure. And you're at DLeaf43 on X, DLeaf43 on X. Tell us about your show, David, and anything else you'd like to plug.
For sure. Thank you, Robert. So I do Hawks breakdowns. When we play teams during the regular season, I'll bring on a fan or someone who covers that team, and we'll talk through the game, keys to the game, breakdowns of film. I make YouTube videos. I'm on TikTok. I'm on Twitter. All under the same name, DLeaf43. So, yeah, definitely appreciate any support.
Man, I know the Rockets appreciate, this insight, Rockets fans, and I really appreciate you doing this good stuff on Capela. Thanks for taking the time.
Of course.
All right, one last thing before we go. There's just a ton of fun interviews in our Houston Rockets history YouTube playlist. Listen to this story from longtime H-Town sports reporter David Alati talking about some locker room drama back in the day between Hakeem, Charles Barkley, and Clyde Drexler. It's a hell of a tale. And of course, look for the complete conversation in our archives. You were covering the Hakeem, Clyde, and Barkley Rockets. And there was a game that comes down to the final play. The Rockets lose the game on a missed shot. And David, it led to a little locker room soap opera drama.
Yeah, it did. That was one of the oddest post-game locker rooms I've ever seen. As you said, the game came down to the final shot. Rockets didn't make the shot. I think it was Clyde that took it. They lose the game. Afterwards, I mean, losing locker rooms are always pretty somber and low-key. And this was more of the same. And we interviewed Hakeem. But Hakeem started off right away. I don't recall his exact words, but he wanted it known he was not happy with the call on the last play, the play that was run. And he said things like, this coach needs to understand that when you have a big man, you go to him on the final play. I'm a big man. You have to go to the big man. That's fundamental. Hakeem used to love to say that's fundamental to basketball. That's fundamental to basketball. And when a superstar like that is taking a shot at his coach, that's news. That's big news, especially guys with the stature of Hakeem and Rudy T, who was the coach at the time. We were all sort of taken aback by, holy cow. He's ticked off at Rudy because he didn't get the last shot and the Rockets lost. Barkley's locker was about 2, maybe 3 seats over. So we all walk over to Charles Barkley's locker. And by the way, no matter how much he says it, Barkley loved media, but that's another story. We interviewed Charles Barkley and tell him Hakeem Olajuwon wasn't happy. He said that the last play should have gone to him, that Rudy needs to understand when you have a big man, that's who you go to on the last play for a bucket. Well, Charles didn't agree with Hakeem. And Charles, he wasn't gonna mince his words. First words out of his mouth were, well, that's because Hakeem is selfish. It's all about Hakeem, or something to that effect. So he sided with Rudy. And now you really got a controversy in the locker room. I mean, can you imagine 2 big stars like this? One is mad at the coach. Another one is mad at the guy for being mad at the coach. So we said, holy cow, the story's getting bigger and bigger in this locker room. Clyde was another few seats over in the locker room. So we all go over to Clyde. Clyde agreed with Hakeem. It should have, even though Clyde took the last shot, I believe. It should have gone to Hakeem. He's our big guy. That's who should have taken the shot. Barkley, upon hearing that, had some few choice words for Clyde. Clyde had a few choice words across the locker room at him, and they weren't kidding around. You can tell when players are just kidding around and when they're serious. This was a serious confrontation. They were getting more heated at each other. Of course, they didn't get along anyway to begin with, but this didn't help. So I was done with the interviews. I went outside the locker room into the hallway, and BJ, who was the late BJ, Jalen Johnson, was a Rocket scout at the time. I knew BJ pretty well. And part of BJ's role is to sort of be a conduit between the players and the head coach. So I told BJ, two of your big stars in there squaring off. I would get in there if I were you. And BJ, he sprinted toward that locker room, flew the door open. I wasn't there to see what happened next, but I'm presuming he separated them, calmed them down, whatever he did. The next day, at shoot around or practice, whatever, I guess it was practice, Charles walks out to meet the media with Hakeem under his arm on this side, Clyde under his arm on this side, walk up to the media and tells them, you guys are destroying our team. We're getting along just fine. So obviously they had to make it look like everything was good after the drama of the previous evening.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, don't forget to support us by subscribing and commenting on YouTube. You can always listen to us on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends about us and share our show links on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.